The autumn wind howled through the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, carrying with it the scent of pine and the promise of an early winter. St. Catherine's Convent stood like a fortress against the darkening sky, its Gothic spires piercing the grey clouds that gathered above the isolated valley. For over a century, the stone walls had sheltered generations of nuns who had chosen silence and devotion over the chaos of the modern world. Helena Martinez adjusted her thick wool coat as she stepped out of her rental car, the gravel crunching beneath her boots. At 34, she had restored sacred art in cathedrals across the country, but there was something about this place that made her pause. The silence was absolute. No traffic, no city sounds, just the whisper of wind through ancient stones. "You must be Helena," came a gentle voice from the convent's heavy wooden doors. Sister Margaret approached with measured steps, her grey habit rustling softly against the stone courtyard. Her weathered face bore the serene expression of someone who had found peace in routine, though her eyes held a weight that spoke of decades of unspoken burdens. "Welcome to St. Catherine's. I'm afraid you've arrived at rather a melancholy time," Sister Margaret said, extending a work-worn hand. "The diocese has made their decision. We'll be closing our doors in 3 months. Helena shook her hand, noting the firm grip that spoke of years of manual labor and prayer. "I'm sorry to hear that. How long have you been here?" 43 years, Sister Margaret replied, her gaze drifting to the chapel's stained glass windows, where the fading afternoon light cast jeweled patterns on the courtyard stones. "I came here as a postulant when I was barely out of high school. This place has been my entire life." As they walked toward the main building, Helena noticed the careful maintenance despite the obvious age of the structure. Every stone seemed purposefully placed, every garden bed meticulously tended. This was a place where attention to detail wasn't just practiced, it was sacred. "The art collection is quite extensive," Sister Margaret continued, leading Helena through corridors lined with religious paintings and carved wooden sculptures. Some pieces date back to the convent's founding in 1889. The diocese wants everything properly catalogued before they decide what to preserve and what to sell. The word hung heavy in the air. Helena had seen this before, the slow dismantling of communities that had stood for generations. Their treasures scattered to museums and private collectors, while their stories disappeared into bureaucratic files. They entered the chapel, and Helena's breath caught. The space was magnificent in its simplicity. Rows of worn wooden pews faced a modest altar, above which hung a carved crucifix that seemed to glow in the soft light filtering through stained glass windows. The walls were adorned with paintings depicting scenes from the lives of saints, their colors muted but still vibrant after decades of candlelight and incense. "The restoration work will take several weeks," Helena said, pulling out her notebook and beginning to examine the nearest painting. "Some of these pieces could be museum quality with proper care." Sister Margaret nodded, though her expression remained distant. "There's something you should know about this place, Helena, about its history." Helena looked up from her notes, sensing the shift in the older woman's tone. 18 years ago, we lost one of our sisters. Sister Clara Moreau. She was very dear to all of us." Sister Margaret's voice carried a tremor she couldn't quite suppress. "She disappeared during our midnight prayer vigil. One moment she was kneeling in the back pew, the next, gone. Her habit was found folded neatly on the bench, as if she had simply vanished into thin air." The chapel suddenly felt colder, despite the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Helena set down her notebook, giving Sister Margaret her full attention. "The police investigated, of course," Sister Margaret continued, her fingers working nervously at the rosary beads hanging from her belt. "But they found nothing. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. The official report concluded that she had likely suffered some kind of mental breakdown and wandered off into the mountains. Her body was never found." "That must have been devastating for the community," Helena said softly. Sister Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Clara was special. She had a gift for bringing light to dark places, for making people feel seen and valued. When she disappeared, it was as if the heart was torn out of our community. Many of the sisters left soon after. We never quite recovered. Helena felt the weight of the older woman's grief, understanding now why the convent felt so heavy with unspoken sorrow. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because her presence still lingers here," Sister Margaret whispered, glancing around the chapel, as if expecting to see a figure kneeling in the shadows. "And because, well, you'll be spending a lot of time alone in these spaces. Sometimes the past has a way of making itself known." As Sister Margaret led her to the sacristy, where many of the smaller artifacts were stored, Helena couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The narrow room was filled with chalices, candlesticks, and religious vestments carefully preserved in climate-controlled cases. Paintings covered nearly every inch of wall space, some clearly valuable, others simple devotional pieces created by the sisters themselves. "I'll leave you to get oriented," Sister Margaret said, handing Helena a set of keys. "The main door locks automatically at 8 o'clock, but these will get you in and out as needed. We rise for lauds at 4:30 in the morning, so you'll hear the bell tower then." Alone in the sacristy, Helena began her preliminary assessment of the collection. She moved methodically from piece to piece, photographing each item and making detailed notes about condition and estimated value. The work was familiar and comforting, requiring the kind of focused attention that had always helped her process difficult emotions. It was as she was examining a small alcove near the back of the sacristy that she noticed it, a single white candle tucked behind a painted icon of Saint Catherine. Unlike the other candles in the room, this one appeared to have been forgotten, gathering dust in the shadowy recess. Helena carefully lifted the candle, noting its weight and the quality of the wax. It was handmade, the kind the sisters likely crafted themselves for their prayer services. Without thinking, she reached for the matches she always carried for examining artwork in poor lighting. The flame caught immediately, casting a warm glow in the small alcove. And that's when she saw them. Faint marks on the wall behind where the candle had been hidden. Letters, barely visible, scratched into the plaster as if someone had written with their fingernail or a small stone. Helena moved closer, holding the candle steady. The writing was difficult to make out, worn by time and obscured by layers of dust and wax residue, but gradually words began to emerge from the shadows. C.M., October 15th, 2006. "Forgive me, for I cannot stay silent any longer. The truth lives in darkness, but God sees all. A friend who loved her." Helena's heart began to race. C.M., Clara Moreau, October 15th, 2006. Just 3 days before Sister Margaret had said Clara disappeared. Someone had hidden this message here, in a place where it might never be found, or where it would only be found by someone looking very carefully. Helena photographed the inscription with trembling hands, then sat back on her heels, staring at the flickering candle flame. 18 years of silence, and now this. A message from the past, waiting patiently in the darkness for someone to bring it to light. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old windows of the sacristy. Helena glanced around the room, seeing it now with different eyes. How many other secrets might be hidden in these walls? How many other messages might be waiting to tell Clara's story? She thought of Sister Margaret's words, about Clara's gift for bringing light to dark places, about the way her disappearance had torn the heart out of the community. What had Clara discovered that required her to leave a hidden message? What truth had she been unable to speak aloud? Helena carefully returned the candle to its hiding place, but not before memorizing every word of the inscription. Tomorrow, she would begin her official restoration work, but tonight, she had a different kind of research to do. As she locked up the sacristy and made her way to her car, Helena noticed a light on in one of the upper windows of the convent. A figure moved past the window, Sister Margaret, perhaps, or one of the few remaining sisters who still called this place home. The drive down the mountain road was treacherous in the gathering darkness, but Helena's mind was elsewhere. She thought about the careful way Clara's habit had been folded, about the complete absence of evidence, about 18 years of silence. Most of all, she thought about that hidden message and the words that echoed in her mind. The truth lives in darkness, but God sees all. In the town of Cedar Falls, at the base of the mountain, Helena checked into the Pineview Lodge, a modest inn that catered to hikers and tourists visiting the area. The clerk, a chatty woman in her 50s, brightened when Helena mentioned St. Catherine's Convent. "Oh, you're working up at the old convent. Such a shame they're closing it. My grandmother used to take me up there for their Christmas services when I was little. Beautiful music those nuns had." The woman's expression grew more serious, though it was never quite the same after that poor girl disappeared. "Sister Clara, wasn't it such a tragedy?" Helena felt her pulse quicken. "You remember it?" "Oh, honey, everyone in Cedar Falls remembers. It was the biggest thing to happen here in decades. Police cars going up and down that mountain road for weeks, search parties combing the forest, never found a trace of her." The clerk shook her head sadly. "Some folks said she must have fallen into one of the old mine shafts up there. Others thought maybe she just couldn't handle the isolation anymore and ran off to start a new life somewhere." "What did you think happened?" Helena asked. The clerk glanced around the empty lobby, then leaned closer. "Between you and me, I always thought there was more to it than the police let on. That detective who handled the case, David Chen, he used to come into my husband's hardware store sometimes. He always seemed frustrated, like he knew there were pieces missing but couldn't put his finger on what they were." Helena made a mental note of the detective's name. "Is he still around?" "Oh no, honey. David left the force not long after that case, moved away from Cedar Falls entirely. I heard through the grapevine that he became a journalist, works for one of those investigative magazines now. Can't say I blame him. Small-town police work probably felt pretty limiting after dealing with a mystery like that." That night, Helena sat in her hotel room with her laptop, searching for information about Detective David Chen and the disappearance of Sister Clara Moreau. What she found was frustratingly sparse. A few brief news articles from local papers, all repeating the same basic facts. A promising postulant had vanished during a religious service. Despite an extensive search, no trace of her had been found. The case remained open but inactive. But what struck Helena was what wasn't in the articles. No quotes from other sisters about Clara's state of mind. No details about her background or family. No mention of any personal struggles or conflicts within the convent community. It was as if Clara had been erased from the story of her own disappearance. Helena opened a new search tab and typed in "David Chen journalist." After scrolling through several pages of results, she found what she was looking for. A byline in Mountain West Investigator, a regional magazine specializing in unsolved cases and local government corruption. David Chen's author bio was brief but intriguing. Former law enforcement officer turned investigative journalist, focusing on cold cases and institutional accountability, based in Denver, Colorado. His most recent articles dealt with missing persons cases and police misconduct, exactly the kind of expertise that might be useful in understanding what had really happened to Clara Moreau 18 years ago. Helena copied his contact information from the magazine's website, then sat staring at her phone. Was she really about to reach out to a complete stranger based on a hidden message scratched into a wall? Was she letting her imagination run away with her? But then she thought about Sister Margaret's grief, still fresh after 18 years. About the way the older woman had spoken of Clara's gift for bringing light to dark places. About the careful folding of a habit and the complete absence of evidence. Helena picked up her phone and began typing. "Mr. Chen, I hope you remember the Clara Moreau case from Cedar Falls, Colorado. I'm an art restorer working at St. Catherine's Convent, and I've discovered something that might interest you. Would you be willing to meet?" She hit send before she could change her mind, then sat back against the hotel room's headboard, watching the snow begin to fall outside her window. The flakes danced in the glow of the parking lot lights, each one unique and fragile, disappearing the moment it touched the ground. Just like Clara Moreau, Helena thought. There, one moment, gone the next, leaving behind only questions and the faint traces of a life that had mattered to someone. Her phone buzzed with a reply. "I remember the case very well. Can you meet tomorrow evening? There's a coffee shop called Mountain Grounds on Main Street in Cedar Falls. 7 o'clock? Helena typed back, "I'll be there." As she settled into bed, Helena found herself thinking about the inscription hidden behind the candle. A friend who loved her. Someone had cared enough about Clara to risk leaving a message, to ensure that someday someone might know that her disappearance hadn't been as simple as the official report suggested. Tomorrow, Helena would continue her restoration work, carefully cleaning and cataloguing the convent's treasures. But she would also be looking more carefully at the walls and hidden spaces, searching for other messages that might have been left by someone who knew the truth about what happened to Sister Clara Moreau. Outside her window, the snow continued to fall, covering the town of Cedar Falls in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. But Helena knew that beneath the surface, the past was still there, waiting patiently to be uncovered by someone willing to look closely enough to see it. The next day dawned crisp and clear, with fresh snow dusting the peaks of the Rocky Mountains like powdered sugar on dark chocolate. Helena arrived at St. Catherine's Convent early, wanting to examine the hidden inscription again in daylight before her meeting with David Chen that evening. Sister Margaret greeted her at the door with a warm smile, though Helena noticed the dark circles under her eyes suggested another sleepless night. "You're here early, dear. I hope you're finding everything you need for your work." "Yes, thank you," Helena replied, studying the older woman's face. "Sister Margaret, I was wondering if you could tell me more about Sister Clara, what she was like as a person." The question seemed to catch Sister Margaret off guard. She paused in the corridor, her hand gripping the wooden banister of the stairs leading to the upper floors. "Clara was luminous," she said finally. "That's the word I always come back to. She had this way of making everyone feel important, worthy of attention. During community prayers, she would sit with the older sisters who had trouble with their knees, helping them up and down. She started a vegetable garden that fed not just us, but half the families in Cedar Falls during the harsh winters." Helena waited, sensing there was more. "She was also stubborn," Sister Margaret continued, a slight smile crossing her lips. "When she believed something was right, she wouldn't let it go. Mother Superior used to say Clara had an inconvenient relationship with justice." What did she mean by that? Sister Margaret's expression grew troubled. "Clara asked difficult questions about the way things were done here, about traditions that perhaps should have been examined more closely. She believed that serving God meant serving truth, even when that truth was uncomfortable." They had reached the chapel, and Sister Margaret paused at the threshold, her eyes scanning the empty pews as if she could still see Clara kneeling there. The night she disappeared, she had requested a private meeting with Mother Superior. They spoke for nearly an hour in her office after evening prayers. None of us knew what they discussed, but Clara seemed agitated afterward. Determined. Helena felt her pulse quicken. "Did Mother Superior ever say what they talked about?" "Mother Superior died 7 years ago," Sister Margaret said quietly. "She took whatever they discussed to her grave. But I remember thinking at the time that Clara looked like someone who had made a difficult decision." Helena spent the morning in the sacristy, carefully examining every inch of the small room. In the daylight streaming through the single window, she could see the inscription more clearly. The handwriting was feminine, hurried, as if written by someone who didn't have much time. The scratches in the plaster were deep enough to have required considerable effort. This wasn't a casual message, but something someone had desperately needed to preserve. She photographed the inscription from multiple angles, then began examining other areas of the sacristy. Behind a tall cabinet of vestments, she found something else, scratches in the wooden floor that looked deliberate. When she moved the cabinet aside, she discovered they formed letters. "Look beneath." Helena's heart raced as she examined the floorboards. One section seemed slightly raised compared to the others. She ran her fingers along the edges and found that it moved slightly when pressed. Working carefully with a small restoration tool from her kit, she managed to lift the board. Beneath it was a small space, just large enough to hold a few items. Helena reached in and pulled out a cloth bundle, her hands trembling slightly. Inside the cloth was a leather journal, its pages yellowed but still intact. The journal was filled with Clara's handwriting, the same script as the wall inscription. Helena opened to a random page and began reading, March 15th, 2006. Mother Superior says I'm being overly dramatic, but I can't ignore what I've seen. The financial records don't match what she's told the diocese. Money that should be going to the orphanage in Denver is being redirected somewhere else. When I asked about it, she said it was administrative complexity and I wouldn't understand. But I do understand. I understand that children are going without proper medical care while we're funding something we're not supposed to be funding. Helena flipped through more pages, her shock growing with each entry. April 3rd, 2006. I followed the delivery truck that comes once a month. It doesn't go to the orphanage. It goes to a private residence in Aspen, a house that belongs to Bishop Morrison's brother. Sister Agatha saw me coming back and asked where I'd been. I lied and said I was walking in the forest. I've never lied to a sister before, but I'm starting to understand that some truths are dangerous here. September 20th, 2006. I can't stay silent anymore. The amount of money being diverted is enormous, enough to fully fund 3 orphanages. Mother Superior and Bishop Morrison are involved in something that goes against everything we've vowed to stand for. I'm going to contact someone outside the church, but first I need to document everything. The final entry was dated October 15th, 2006, the same date as the wall inscription. October 15th, 2006. I met with Mother Superior tonight. I told her I know about the money, about Bishop Morrison, about all of it. I gave her a choice. Either she reports it to the proper authorities, or I will. She asked me to pray about it, to consider the damage such revelations could do to the church's reputation. She said I was young and didn't understand the complexities of administration. But I'm not young anymore, and I understand perfectly. I'm going to call the State Attorney General's office tomorrow. If something happens to me, I pray that someone will find this and know that I tried to do what was right. Clara Moreau. Helena sat back on her heels, the journal clutched in her hands. Clara hadn't disappeared. She had been disappeared. The neat folding of her habit, the lack of any evidence, the incomplete police investigation, it all made sense now. She carefully returned the journal to its hiding place and replaced the floorboard. This evidence needed to be preserved, but she had to be smart about how she handled it. If Clara had been killed to keep her quiet, then the people responsible might still be in positions of power. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Helena went through the motions of her restoration work, but her mind was consumed with Clara's journal and what it revealed. By the time evening came, she was eager to meet David Chen and share what she had discovered. Mountain Grounds was a cozy coffee shop on Cedar Falls Main Street with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture that gave it the feel of a living room. Helena arrived early and chose a table in the back corner where they could speak privately. David Chen arrived precisely on time. He was in his early 40s, with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His handshake was firm, and Helena noticed the way he unconsciously scanned the room before sitting down. Old habits from his police days, she suspected. "Thank you for reaching out," he said, settling into his chair with a cup of black coffee. "I have to admit, I've never stopped thinking about the Clara Moreau case. It was one of those investigations that haunted me. Too many unanswered questions, too many pieces that didn't fit." Helena leaned forward. "What if I told you that Clara didn't disappear voluntarily and that she didn't have a mental breakdown?" David's expression sharpened. "I'd say that aligns with my suspicions, but I'd also want to know what evidence you've found." Helena told him about the hidden inscription and the journal, watching his face grow increasingly grim as she related Clara's discoveries about the financial irregularities. Bishop Morrison, David said when she finished. He's Archbishop Morrison now. He was promoted about 10 years ago and moved to the Denver Archdiocese. Very influential, very connected politically. You think he was involved in Clara's disappearance? David was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. When I was investigating the case, I kept running into roadblocks. The diocese was cooperative on the surface, but I sensed they were holding back information. Mother Superior claimed Clara had been struggling with her vocation, that she had expressed doubts about religious life. But when I spoke to other sisters individually, they described someone who was deeply committed to her faith. Did you suspect foul play? I suspected a lot of things, but I couldn't prove any of them. The case was officially transferred to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation after a few weeks, but nothing came of that either. Eventually, it just went cold. David's jaw tightened. I became a journalist because I got tired of cases being closed for political reasons rather than lack of evidence. Helena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Colorado weather. So, what do we do now? Clara's journal is evidence of a crime, but it's been hidden for 18 years. And if the people responsible are still in power, we need to be very careful, David said. But we also can't let Clara's courage be wasted. She died trying to expose the truth. The least we can do is make sure that truth finally comes to light. They spent the next hour planning their approach. David would use his journalist credentials to request access to the original police files and interview retired officers who had worked the case. Helena would continue her restoration work at the convent while carefully documenting any additional evidence she might find. There's something else, David said as they prepared to leave. I've been tracking financial irregularities in Catholic institutions across the region for a series I'm working on. If Clara was right about the money being diverted, there might be a paper trail we can follow. Church financial records eventually become public documents, especially when federal tax exemptions are involved. As they walked to their cars, Helena felt a mixture of excitement and fear. They were about to challenge very powerful people, individuals who had already demonstrated they were willing to kill to protect their secrets. David, she said, as they reached her rental car, how do we know we can trust each other? I mean, really trust each other? He smiled for the first time that evening. I spent 15 years as a cop, and I've never been able to let go of a case that felt unfinished. You're an art restorer who could have easily ignored that inscription and focused on your job. But instead, you're here, willing to risk your safety to find justice for someone you never met. He extended his hand. I think that tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Helena shook his hand, feeling the firm grip of someone who understood the weight of keeping promises. Clara deserves justice, even if it's 18 years late. The drive back to her hotel was treacherous in the darkness, but Helena's mind was focused on their next steps. Tomorrow, she would return to the convent and continue her careful search for evidence. But tonight, for the first time in 18 years, Clara Moreau's story was no longer buried in silence. In her hotel room, Helena opened her laptop and began typing up her notes from the day. As she worked, she thought about Clara's final journal entry, the courage it must have taken to confront Mother Superior. Knowing the risks involved, Clara had been willing to sacrifice everything for the truth, and in the end, that truth had cost her life. But secrets had a way of surviving, even when the people who kept them didn't. Clara's journal had waited patiently beneath the floorboards, and her inscription had remained hidden behind the candle, both of them holding on to the truth until someone finally came looking for it. Helena glanced at the time. Nearly midnight. In 6 hours, she would hear the bell tower calling the remaining sisters to morning prayers, just as Clara would have heard it 18 years ago. The difference was that now, finally, someone was listening to what Clara had been trying to say. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. I've made some calls. Meeting tomorrow with a retired detective who worked the case. We'll share what I learn. Helena typed back, I'll keep looking for more evidence at the convent. We're going to find out what really happened to her. As she settled into bed, Helena thought about Sister Margaret's words. Clara had a gift for bringing light to dark places. Even in death, Clara was still bringing light to darkness, still forcing uncomfortable truths into the open where they couldn't be ignored. Outside her window, the snow continued to fall, but Helena no longer saw it as a blanket covering the past. Instead, she saw it as a clean slate, a chance for truth to finally emerge from the shadows where it had been hidden for far too long. The investigation was just beginning, but Helena knew that Clara Moreau's story was finally going to be told, and this time no one would be able to silence it.